Hey everyone, welcome back to the TLC's Sister Wives Secret. I'm Olivia. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Over time, what began as a look into plural marriage gradually turned into a deep dive case study in toxic dynamics and destructive relationships. Truth be told, many members of the Brown family have become almost unbearable to watch on screen. While Robyn Brown often steals the spotlight as the show's most notorious villain, let's not forget her son from a previous marriage to David Jessup, Dayton Brown. When Robyn tied the knot with Cody, he officially adopted Dayton along with his sisters, Aurora and Brianna. From the start, Dayton didn't seem thrilled with the situation and never really showed Cody the level of respect he seemed to expect. Early seasons of the series actually showed Dayton resisting the idea of fully joining the Brown clan. And even though he's never been a central figure in the narrative, it's important to remember he was only 15 years old when all this was happening. There's even a moment in season 2 where Dayton breaks a family photo of Cody, something Robyn later brushed off as an accident. But it didn't take long for fans to catch on. Dayton wasn't exactly jumping for joy over his mother's new husband. Now I know one of Cody's original 3 wives, Janelle, often gets portrayed as being pushed aside. But let's be honest, Janelle's not always the helpless victim she's made out to be. Despite her reputation as the more grounded, level-headed sister wife, she's made some questionable calls. Starting with that RV purchase. Not only did the RV cost a hefty chunk of change, but it also lacked some pretty basic amenities, and that only highlighted how reckless some of her choices can be. Then there's Mary. Once Robyn entered the picture, Mary wasted no time cozying up to her, not out of genuine affection, but as a way to keep her influence intact. She clearly wasn't fond of Robyn at first, but aligning with her seemed like a strategic move to stay on Cody's good side. Many of Mary's relationships on the show felt more like deals than bonds, transactional even. And let's not forget her go-to move, throwing emotional tantrums whenever Cody didn't prioritize her, spinning it into her own personal victim storyline. Mary was a master of manipulation. She'd storm out of family events, pick passive-aggressive fights, and when that didn't work, she'd fall back on her infertility struggles as a shield from criticism. She consistently leaned on her inability to conceive as an emotional defense mechanism to dodge accountability. Double standards much? And if you want a real example of just how self-absorbed Mary could be, remember how she essentially pushed away her daughter Mariah after she came out as gay. Now, Mary's catfishing scandal might just be one of the most jaw-dropping moments in reality TV history. Season 7 revealed that Mary had been having an online relationship with someone named Sam, who, as it turned out, wasn't a man at all. It was actually a woman pretending to be someone else just to bait Mary. And even though many believe Mary was emotionally manipulated, the fact remains. She was emotionally unfaithful to Cody. Unsurprisingly, the revelation rocked both the family and the fan base. But the catfisher knew exactly what they were doing. They preyed on Mary's emotional vulnerability at a time when she felt completely disconnected from Cody. Manipulated or not, Mary fell for the trap, and the fallout was brutal. In a lot of ways, Sam didn't just deceive Mary. They drove a serious wedge between her and the rest of the Brown family. As a Sister Wives follower, I mean it when I say that David Jessup's influence still lingers. Robyn herself has acknowledged that Jessup played a major role in her life long before Cody ever entered the picture. Their marriage ended in divorce, with Robyn later describing the relationship as emotionally abusive. Now let's talk about Gwen Brown, or just Gwen, who, out of all of Cody's kids, might mirror him the most. Gwen is outspoken and bold, often clashing with Cody for those very reasons. She also has a flair for drama and seems to enjoy putting herself in the spotlight, both on and off the screen. Unlike many of her siblings, Gwen has tried carving out a path outside of the Brown family brand. She even has her own YouTube channel. Still, a lot of fans believe she's less focused on building a unique identity and more interested in cashing in on the sister wives name. And look, when Gwen calls out her dad for his reckless spending and financial favoritism toward Robyn and her kids, I'm right there with her. She's not wrong. But at the same time, some viewers are uncomfortable with how she monetizes her family drama. While many appreciate Gwen's candor, the fact that she profits off dragging her relatives through the mud raises some serious questions about her true intentions. Is she genuinely trying to have an honest dialogue? Or is this just a strategic way to boost her income? Things escalated when Gwen declined to attend her mom Christine's wedding to David Woolley, a decision that stirred up plenty of backlash. Pair that with her Patreon controversy, where she failed to deliver promised content, and it's not hard to see why fans are skeptical. At this point, it feels like Gwen is more concerned with shaping her own narrative than being a dependable member of the family. Her personal feelings almost always seem to take priority. And while all of Robyn's kids can come off a little odd, there's just something about Aurora that doesn't sit right. Maybe it's Robyn's suffocating parenting style, but Aurora never seems to have matured emotionally. On the show, she's often portrayed as hypersensitive and fragile. And honestly, the way she's constantly infantilized is unsettling, especially considering she's now 22 years old. What's even stranger is that Aurora doesn't seem to mind. She leans into the role, plays the part, and remains perfectly fine being portrayed as powerless. Her dynamic with Cody adds an extra layer of discomfort. Sometimes it veers into territory that feels a little off. Cody constantly drops everything to tend to Aurora's emotional needs, often at the expense of his biological kids, because she demands his attention nonstop. Meanwhile, Robyn remains the only sister wife with a nanny, a move that really underscored just how far Cody was willing to go to keep her happy. It reinforced her status as the top wife. The arrival of the nanny sealed Robyn's image as this fragile, helpless damsel who couldn't handle basic responsibilities without outside help. But it wasn't just about the nanny. Robyn actively influenced Cody to prioritize her children over the others. And she didn't just stop there. She had plenty of influence over Cody himself. Instead of using that power to help him grow into a better husband and father, she chose to maintain control. That unwillingness to challenge Cody or hold him accountable only worsened things. As a result, Robyn has become one of the most disliked figures in the entire Brown family, thanks to her selfish behavior and her unyielding support of Cody's outdated patriarchal mindset. And while Robyn is clearly the show's leading antagonist, I'll say this, Cody still outranks her. In my opinion, he's the ultimate villain of TLC. Honestly, Sister Wives wasn't always this messy, and Cody Brown wasn't always the villain he is now. In the show's earlier seasons, while his beliefs were clearly rooted in sexism, he still managed to show affection and concern for his wives and children. But slowly, the family began to unravel, largely due to his blatant favoritism and growing obsession with Robyn. Let's be real. None of the wives would have felt the need to constantly compete for Cody's attention if he hadn't started pitting them against one another in the first place. And speaking of the show's unraveling, let's talk about Tamron Hall. She hosted the Sister Wives Tell-All specials up until season 9 and then mysteriously disappeared from the role with no real explanation. Since then, the show has cycled through multiple hosts, but not one has come close to matching Hall's authenticity or her natural way of challenging the Browns. What really speaks volumes is how every host who came after her shares one common trait. None of them dare to hold Cody accountable. Tamron Hall's style was anything but fluffy. Anyone who's been watching since Sister Wives premiered in 2010 knows Cody's obsession with control runs deep. He's always tried to present this illusion of a big, happy family, regardless of what was actually going on behind closed doors. Whether it was his private life with the wives or the way outsiders perceived the family, Cody was always curating an image. But he started losing control the moment Hall stepped into the tell-all role. With a background in journalism, Hall didn't shy away from uncomfortable truths. She tackled the family's issues head-on, even if it made Cody, or anyone else, squirm. That's what a real tell-all is supposed to do. And when someone hesitated to answer, Hall would push back and remind them, "You signed up for this." Cody hates accountability. He despises being confronted with facts that contradict his narrative. That's why so many viewers respected Hall, because she held him to task for the very things he tried to deny. Unsurprisingly, Hall was suddenly removed, and not because she did anything wrong. Her probing questions made Robyn and Cody uncomfortable, and that was enough to get her ousted. Cody always wants to maintain his nice guy persona, and Hall was too close to exposing his emotional neglect of Mary. It was clear Hall saw through his performance, and she paid the price for it. Ironically, Mary herself appeared on one of Hall's last episodes and made it clear that she never had any issues with the host. So if there was a problem, it was definitely on Cody's end. In contrast, the current host, Sukanya Krishnan, doesn't ask the hard questions. She tends to offer Robyn and Cody a comfortable space to air their side, rarely pushing back or challenging them. The ex-wives, meanwhile, are given minimal screen time and even fewer opportunities to speak their truth. The format now feels disconnected from the reality of the show, and honestly, it wouldn't be surprising if Cody is pulling strings behind the scenes, dictating what Krishnan can or can't ask. The tell-alls have started to feel hollow, a far cry from the depth and rawness Hall once brought. Back in the early days, when the Brown family first stepped into the public eye, their lives were painted as this vibrant mosaic, stitched together by love, shared faith, and an unconventional yet committed family bond. Cody appeared to be the force holding it all together, a man juggling multiple homes with care, affection, and time. The concept of family unity seemed solid and unshakable. Every wife and child seemed to fit neatly into their roles, moving in sync like a well-oiled machine. But even the brightest tapestries can fray. But even the most carefully woven designs begin to fray over time. And in the case of the Brown family, the seams didn't just loosen, they ripped wide open. Subtle shifts in behavior and unspoken favoritism slowly began to shake the foundation of what once looked like a unified household. What was once a singular, functioning family unit is now little more than splintered fragments, each telling its own story of exclusion, hurt, and eventually divorce. At the core of all this dysfunction is a question that can no longer be ignored. Did the family patriarch begin pouring his time, affection, and attention into one branch of the family tree while letting the others wither? In the early days of this plural marriage, every child was celebrated equally, each one welcomed with the same joy and raised under the shared roof of communal parenting. The sister wives embraced each other's children as their own. At least outwardly, there were no labels like mine or yours. There was only ours. But this delicate harmony began to unravel the moment a new wife entered the picture, bringing with her not just a different dynamic, but children from a previous relationship. At first, their arrival was hailed as a blessing, a new chapter in the family's story. The patriarch, in particular, seemed ecstatic to welcome more lives into the fold. But slowly, something shifted. The sound of his footsteps echoed more frequently through her house. Her children were the ones laughing in the background while he played games and told stories. He sat at her table for dinner, not just on holidays, but on random weekday evenings. Her kids had access to his affection, his attention, and his presence in ways the others no longer did. Meanwhile, in the other homes, the ones that used to light up at the sound of his arrival, the silence grew louder. The children left behind had once clung to brief, sacred moments of connection with their father. Now they were learning what it meant to be sidelined. Their milestones were ignored, their heartaches unnoticed. The dream began to die. What was once envisioned as a shared life, filled with porch laughter, family barbecues, and grandkids running between the legs of smiling sister wives, started to look like a lie. The newest wife had entered this arrangement believing in the principle of plural love. She'd grown up in a culture where large, blended families thrived on unity. She imagined decades of shared motherhood and intertwined lives. And to her credit, she tried. She attempted to integrate, to bridge the gaps, to bring her children into the circle. But no amount of good intentions could erase the unspoken tension, the passive resentments that had already begun to simmer beneath the surface. And as her husband grew more deeply embedded in her household, the older children, the ones who once knew him best, began to feel the shift. At first it was subtle, but over time, the bitterness became undeniable. Those other branches of the family tree, the ones that had once bloomed with life, began to wither in the shadows of his absence. The vibrant energy that once defined this unique family began to fade. Color turned to gray. The connection that once held them all together started to decay. And then came the pandemic. While other families used the isolation to grow closer, the Browns fell further apart. Instead of being a time of healing or reconnection, lockdowns became the catalyst for exposing every crack that had already formed. Under the guise of safety, the patriarch made decisions that drove even deeper wedges between households. His visits became rare, and when they did happen, they were awkward, uncomfortable, and often tense. For many in the family, it felt like he had officially chosen his side. What began as confusion quickly spiraled into hurt and then hardened into rage. The inconsistencies in the patriarch's pandemic rules spoke volumes. Restrictions were rigidly enforced in one household, while others watched him come and go with ease elsewhere. It didn't take much for the older children, now young adults, to connect the dots. The message was clear. They no longer mattered. Their emotional needs, their milestones, even their very presence. All of it had been quietly deprioritized in favor of a new, more curated life, one that revolved around the youngest children and their mother. And while those still clinging to hope tried to make excuses, the reality was unavoidable. He was building a new life, one that didn't include everyone. But it wasn't just emotional detachment that fractured the Brown family. It was spiritual, too. Once upon a time, the family had been tightly bonded by their shared faith. When relationships were strained, they still had prayer circles. When life felt chaotic, there were family devotionals and church-led gatherings to pull them back together. Their spiritual foundation was their North Star, something bigger than themselves that guided the choices they made as a plural family. But that compass was slowly abandoned. The move away from their original community marked more than just a geographic shift. It was a spiritual unraveling. Without the shared rituals and religious accountability that had once grounded them, they began to drift, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And perhaps the most damning sign of all was the patriarch himself. Once the spiritual head of the family, his connection to their faith seemed to vanish. He no longer spoke of God or of divine purpose. And when one of his ex-wives tried to formally dissolve their spiritual marriage through the church, he scoffed, rejecting the authority of the very religion he once used to justify their entire lifestyle. It was a slap in the face, not just to her, but to the years of belief they had all built their lives upon. And yet, the deepest cut came when he began referring, publicly, without hesitation, to one household as his core family. That term, so casually uttered, hit like a freight train. To the others, especially the older children who once saw themselves as the center of his universe, it was confirmation of what they had long feared. They had been left behind, forgotten, erased from the narrative. Birthdays come and go without a call. Graduations, weddings, even the birth of grandchildren are met with silence. Some of the older kids have bravely spoken out about their grief and sense of betrayal. Others say nothing at all, nursing private wounds and learning how to move on without a father who once promised them everything. Meanwhile, he fortifies his place in his newly defined family. Adoption papers, signed years ago, made his loyalties official. The family map, once sprawling, inclusive, vibrant, has shrunk to a single home, a single table, and a tightly controlled inner circle. And what of the wife who once seemed to gain everything? Even she is not without sorrow. The dream she entered into, of sisterhood, unity, shared purpose, is now a broken promise. She has spoken openly of her regrets. She admits she lost sight of the communal spirit. That faith fell to the wayside. That her desire for a romantic ideal cost the family its center. And she's not entirely wrong. But it would be a mistake to blame only her. The truth is more tangled than that. Every adult in this story made choices. To prioritize ego over reconciliation, fear over vulnerability, pride over healing.